Hello, my name's Chubblot, but because we're friends, you can call me Chubblot. Let's talk patch 5, also known as the You Asked For This patch. Larian tackled a lot of the suggestions the community had, meaning we got a new dice roll UI, location-specific camps, the ability to rescue Shadowheart,
I've fallen!
and more Astarian scenes, which were promptly uploaded to YouTube by like 50 individual channels. And even though we didn't get an everyone is halsin mode, which I'm sure they're working on for patch 6, the changes added with patch 5 have been pretty well received. But if even this laundry list of changes hasn't sated your desire for more delicious content, then let's have a little snack. With a K. This video will contain Datamined content and spoilers. Same as last time, the things I feel might be story spoilers have been separated out and banished to their own segment later in the video. You'll get another warning before we hit that segment. When it comes to models, we actually have quite a lot to go through. Clearly, someone on the art team felt sorry for me having to show you blank visual assets and placeholders last time, so they left more of their amazing work accessible in this build.
What the hell is this?
First up are two old friends I last documented in the patch 3 Datamined video. Both the Cloaker and the Ghoul have been updated. The Cloaker now has some beautifully terrifying animations, and for some reason the Ghoul has grown wings. I know they look as rigid as the sock you had by your bed in your teenage years, but that's because when I first loaded them in with the ragdoll effects turned on, they did this. Another updated model, although this time from the patch 4 video, is maybe worthy of an arachnophobia warning. We can finally get our first glimpse of the Drider. Bear in mind I chose the hair and skin color for this horrifying boy. I also chose the eye color for his many eyes, although that's not really an issue because they aren't here, they're floating a foot away from his torso. This Drider is the creature Minthara mentions if you side with the goblins and convince her not to kill you.
He was a drow once. Now he is an abomination, a victim of Lolth's cruelty.
There was also a unique quarterstaff added to the game for him, and it features something I believe is called a moon lantern. Myrmidons, also known as Archons, may be making an appearance. These conjured elementals are bound to magical suits of armor. This specific model is for a fire elemental Myrmidon, although obviously it's lacking the fire effects right now. It kinda looks like something Sauron would wear to the beach. Keeping with the elemental theme, there's now an unfinished model for an air elemental. While this might just be an enemy, I'm sure many of you are aware Circle of the Moon Druids gain the ability to wild shape into elementals at level 10. And speaking of wild shape, remember when Sven said this at the panel from Hell 2?
No dinos, not even a small dinosaur.
Well, clearly someone on the design team took this as a challenge because we now have a dinosaur model. It's referred to as a Dilophosaurus, and apparently the versions in the Forgotten Realms can spit venom, which means we're looking at Jurassic Park levels of historical accuracy. Probably for the best, considering the real Dilophosaurus were estimated to be around 7 meters in length. But while our dinosaur buddy may be on the short side, this mound certainly isn't. Whoops, wrong image. The Shambling Mound is one of the largest monster models I've seen so far, probably only beaten out by the adult red dragon we can already meet in game. Also known as Shamblers, these are animated vegetation that engulf and then consume the blood
and flesh of living creatures.
And honestly, it's just nice to know that despite the pandemic, Audrey 2 is still finding work. But it isn't just the plants that are getting bigger. The bulkier models I've been keeping an eye on since patch 3 have also received a significant update. There are now unique heads for either sex, plus one hairstyle designed to fit the larger female model. The camera is a lot better than it was, and it looks like most of the armor sets now have larger models. Among the added clothing models is the Daisy dress, so we can finally make the dreamies we deserve.
I need to go deeper.
But how can I talk about some big, beautiful pixels without talking about Karlach? She got new armor! Yay! And this is brilliant. But I like this. Ignore the eyes and the ears, those are my fault. This is a new unique armor set just for Mama Tiefling. It's even named after her, and I have to say it looks pretty darn barbaric. She even has teeth for a necklace, or vertebrae. I don't know demon anatomy. Similar to other companion-specific armors like Shadowhearts and Astarians, Karlach's armor can be worn by members of any of the races. But there is one piece of armor that's completely unique to her. Sort of. If this looks familiar, it's because it's almost the same as the body armor worn by Commander Jolk. And even more amazing than the armor is what's under it, and I don't mean that like... well, I kind of do. Karlach's new body texture is a masterwork of scars and tattoos, and whoever has been responsible for creating all these aspects of our big communal tiefling wife, we thank you for your service. Similar to tattoos and scars already in the game, Larian have made sure that these little strings of Infernal aren't just gibberish.
What does it say?
Big thanks to Feanor on the Larian Discord for pointing out that she does in fact have Zariel written on her chest and Demonsbane, her epithet, written on her back. It's worth pointing out that this model still isn't totally finished. The horns still don't quite fit, the tail is being pretty bizarre, and the facial rigging doesn't appear to exist yet. I also found reference to a specific hairstyle for Karlach in the files, but unfortunately whatever model it's tied to didn't seem to get packed in with the public build of patch 5.
Makes a pleasant change from Rivers of Blood.
And yes, she still has the paladin tag. I'm gradually slipping into despair.
Your gift is near blinding. Your deity must have blessed you twice over.
Aside from monsters and Karlach, this time around we also get to talk about some decorative assets that were included in the files. And I'm not talking about beds or cabinets, although I could. I'm talking about things like this. While you may expect to find this hanging from your big, tidy goth GF's nose, it's actually an incubator. And where there's an incubator, there must be eggs. Githyanki eggs. And they have no right being this adorable. Obviously, these are linked to the upcoming creche area, which Lae'zel might have mentioned once or twice.
I must find a creche. We must locate a creche. Creche.
Say crack again.
Creche.
And speaking of Lae'zel, she looks like she'll make an excellent oh my god. It's cultural.
I am surrounded by madness.
Last time I covered what we lost, but this time I get to talk about something we've gained, even if it is pretty small. Alongside gnomes, Dragonborn and Half-Orcs are likely coming to the game by full release. Before now, there hadn't really been much movement on that, but with patch 5, we finally got some more information. Both are now mentioned in a file that deals with all of the game's races. The information contained here isn't that interesting, it's just their racial tags and confirmation that both will be restricted from worshipping Vlaakith and Ladagua. But that isn't the only place they show up. Dragonborns now appear to have their own entry in the stats file. What they added to the stat block was a generic entry for Dragonborn melee units like fighters. Half-Orcs didn't get a stat block, but they are referenced as having a unique model. Like Karlach's hair, this entry doesn't point to anything, meaning whatever Half-Orc body assets there might be were not included in the public build. And before you ask, no, I've not found anything about the Githyanki's nicer cousins.
And of a Githzerai.
At the risk of repeating myself, classes are still very difficult to make any predictions about using data mining. Shadowheart has gotten her Cleric of Shar tag back, which may be Larian throwing in the towel when it comes to trying to initially obscure her faith, or it could also have something to do with this cool new animation for channel divinity skills. The symbol of your chosen god now appears when you prepare to cast an ability like Turn Undead or Preserve Life. And interestingly, these assets are tied to the cleric tag your character has, meaning when you add extra cleric tags, you get extra symbols. They included a variant of this animation for some of the currently unavailable channel divinity skills. And they even added a working asset for spiritual weapon in the form of a floating halberd, which attacks with headbutts. The only other big updates that could be class relevant are more related to added armor and objects. While Volo's clothes were always available to multiple races, patch 5 has also added Alfira's clothing for every race. Both of these armor sets are referred to as Bard. We also got models for various instruments, including pan flutes, dulcimers, and schwarms? This doesn't confirm Bard, but it's interesting all the same. The next section will contain the more explicit story spoilers, and you may have noticed it's a pretty hefty portion of the video, partly because I might be getting a little overzealous with what I'm labeling a story spoiler. Although as it turns out, you can give as many warnings as you want, some people will still get upset, but I digress. Click away now if you're at all concerned about story spoilers. To stick with routine, we'll start by checking in on the Duergar Camp, and oh my has it changed. The entire area seems to have been revamped, with all of the previous bugginess now gone. Well, almost. Larian also decided to remove all of the NPCs from this area for some reason, although if you go and save Barkus from the windmill before visiting the Duergar Camp,
That's weird.
then he'll appear here. Sad and alone, staring off into the distance, pining for interaction. Like that elderly relative you just keep meaning to visit. Where is she finding those? As we don't have any NPCs to talk to, we need to turn to the sound bank to figure out the updated story. While before you could either side with Nier or with the Deep Gnomes, you'll now have the option to convince the Duergar to betray Nier, apparently by appealing to some sort of elder.
Help Thren free Nier, then you and my chums grind him up.
It seems the Duergar Nier has working for him are part of the Flameshade clan.
Listen up, Clan Flameshade. We need to cut and run.
You can play on their dislike of how Nier operates in order to garner their support in the fight against him.
Damn right, it's time. You owe my crew 10 days worth of coin, Nier. And the reckoning's come.
The story of the Deep Gnomes has been expanded too. Several new names like Philomene.
If Philomene made it, you'll find her there.
And Larida.
Damn it, Larida. We've lost enough of us. I'm not losing more.
Are bandied about, and they seem to be operating as instigators of a resistance against the Duergar.
Rebels, troublemakers, freedom fighters.
You can even meet one who I'm assuming is Philomene, threatening to blow herself up, maybe?
A few days back, there was a scene. Our friend Philomene, she's a sapper, set off a blast and ran off.
Hold it! I swear to Iron Hand. One more step and a blow us to chunks.
Sounds like you can convince her not to do it and take the smoke powder for yourself.
Take what you want. I'm done lugging it around. Easy to use. Set it and strike it alight.
For reasons.
Ignis!
Not to be outdone, Mr. Punchable's story also got a bit of development, and it seems like for the first time I can think of, you'll be able to convince a true soul that they're not serving a new god, but rather some sort of illicit plot.
I don't understand. I've been following those wretched beasts. You're right. I'm a fool for not seeing it before now. Dying for a cause is one thing, but for a mind flayer, for filth like that, no.
I'm not exactly sure how you'd go about convincing him, but it gives him a crisis of faith, and it sounds like it can lead to him abandoning the Absolute and returning to his people.
It cannot be. Have I betrayed Loth for an imposter? I will take word to the Order of Soul Spiders. They must know of the absolute threat.
Now, the area itself has also technically expanded, like, quite a lot. There's now a new waypoint that points to an ancient forge. This area is impressive, but clearly somewhat unfinished. Did you know that lava is only dangerous at the edges? Big lava have been lying to us for years. You could basically drink it. Please don't drink lava. Again, we have to turn to the sound bank to figure out what this area entails.
There's an adamantine forge back there, Yarg. Stuff's no joke. Stronger than steel, rarer than mithril. It ain't mined, it's made.
I was able to find one item labeled an adamantine ingot, but the description says it's a bronze ingot, so not sure what's going on there. It does mention something called the High House of Gond, which I have to assume is the High House of Wonders. It's a temple in Baldur's Gate dedicated to Gond. The expansion wasn't just horizontal, but also vertical. The new exit to the area appears to be an elevator, and similar to what happens if you approach the other act transitions or the Goblin Camp, approaching this elevator will trigger the scene with the quote-unquote voice of the Absolute.
Hear my voice. Obey my command.
Clicking on the elevator itself just throws up the usual "you have so much more to explore" map screen, and normally that would be the end of the story. However, Larian added this very impressive vista. They're no strangers to detailed background assets, but something about this area just seemed a little much. Unfortunately, it isn't possible to get any closer than this, so we'll just have to— oh, never mind. The most interesting features of this temple area are 2 open and empty coffins and an enormous statue of the one and only Night Song. As for how to access this area, heading back towards the cliff reveals an interactable elevator asset attached to the cliff face. The game never considered me close enough to actually use it, but odds are this is where the elevator from before drops you off, meaning this may be the area in which you're supposed to encounter the Night Song. The creche wasn't the only unreleased area to get some new decorative assets. Several items were added that likely relate to areas in and around the city of Baldur's Gate. For example, assets for an area labelled Hospital were added, including some grim-looking surgical beds, an anatomical diagram, and a huge stage. Another seemingly mundane location mentioned is a brewery containing things like a still and a silo. Moving on to something slightly more interesting, there is an area called Battlefield that includes a lot of siege weaponry like catapults, trebuchet, and battering rams. And there are variant models that show the same siege weapons but completely destroyed, or for you Amazon Marketplace sellers out there, used like new. This is presumably the area pictured in one of the in-game images, which seems to be depicting Baldur's Gate under siege. A more interesting addition was an area just referred to as Lathander. Also called the Morning Lord, he's a good god concerned with a lot of activities ranging from destroying undead to the miracle of childbirth. The assets include a few statues of the god himself. More confusingly, however, is the inclusion of a cable car. And finally, there are 2 assets related to some sort of puzzle element, one being an enormous golden arch with an equally massive crystal mounted in it, and the other being some sort of mechanism. They may be part of something called a solar machine or the radiant sun. There's evidence that there's some overlapping between these assets and the creche area, meaning perhaps the Githyanki are holed up in an old temple to Lathander. Last up, we have the biggest and most difficult to demonstrate decorative asset. These giant arms and hands are related to a model called Astral God. Piecing the model together in Blender leaves us with an enormous skull and multiple arms. My assumption is that this model is one of the many dead gods said to be floating about the astral plane. In addition to this model, we have a new skybox identified as Astral. It's somewhat difficult to get a good look at in game because of the camera limitations, but here's a picture of it unwrapped. These 2 things together may suggest that we're going to be spending some time on the astral plane, possibly meaning those Vlaakith assets from patch 4 weren't just for Lae'zel's dream. The models I've decided to put behind the spoiler wall aren't all necessarily that spoilery. Like I said, I'm just being careful. As well as the lines relating to the new content in the Duergar Camp, all of the companion and PC voices have new lines talking about Merregons.
Tried to hide from the Merregons. Not that it helped.
Merregons are pretty low down on the devilish totem pole, mostly serving as foot soldiers. A Merregon is never seen without its weird mask, which is the only thing left of it when it dies.
Belong to a Merregon. They dissolve upon death, leaving only their masks behind.
They can't speak, but can communicate telepathically, although this is only one-to-one, meaning without a commander they become easily disorganized.
I recognize this. A Merregon wore it. But they don't fight without their infernal commander.
I'm not sure who could be acting as their infernal commander, but the only other devil we got solid evidence of were Orphons. They don't have a unique model yet, but there is an asset called the Orphon Throne in the game. Orphons are devils generally used as bounty hunters, and we know of at least one person being hunted by the forces of hell. Next, the one that probably has no reason being behind the spoiler wall, the Displacer Beast. Displacer beasts are big cats with 6 legs and tentacles because of course they are. They get their name from the fact that they have an innate form of magic which manipulates light to create a sort of mirage that obscures their true location. And the only reason they're behind the spoiler wall is because Displacer beasts feature prominently on some promotional art for the upcoming BG3 tie-in comic, Mindbreaker. I have no idea if those Displacer beasts and this model are in any way related, but I'm being careful. Next is something called the Brewer, and I haven't got a clue what this is. Normally I just Google the names of these models and something comes up, but this time it didn't work. It's giving me undead vibes though, so maybe it's the brainchild of whatever necromancer decided ghouls needed wings. The only other interesting thing is that its stomach is also its mouth, which honestly just sounds like excellent streamlining of the eating process. A+ design choice for our big booty brewer. Remember this guy from last time? Well, he's all grown up now with his own textures and everything. This model is just referred to as Necromancer, which doesn't really narrow it down. He could even be Severin, the Necromancer I spoke about in my story spoiler video, who is trying to steal the Night Song's power. Either way, I love his design, and maybe we'll see more man boobs in the future. To balance out the sheer amount of evil we've seen so far, let's talk about someone good. Devas are celestial beings and one of the many types of angels. It's important that I note this isn't an actual complete model, it's 3 different assets called Deva, which I chose the color of, stuck on a regular human model, meaning there's likely more to come for this guy. While the Deva head model is unique, it isn't exactly unused. During the cutscene where the artifact saves you from the Absolute, you get a shadowy glimpse of 3 people the voice describes as its chosen.
These are my chosen.
These 3 exist in the game files unshadowed, but don't take these designs to heart. They're all clearly identified as being placeholders. This guy, the one everybody thought was Aradin for 5 minutes, is the only one using some unique assets. He's using the Deva head model and wearing a piece of armor identified as belonging to Jaheira. While her model still seems to be a placeholder, Jaheira has received a set of unique armor, and what's more, there are versions of it available to other races. I still don't know what role she'll play in the full game, but at the very least you might be able to loot her equipment. And to wrap things up, Minsk. Don't get too excited. Until now, the head identified as belonging to the legendary ranger was just a messed up version of Daddy Halsin's head.
Abomination.
Now there's a unique head model belonging to Minsk, and I can't apply a texture to it. I apologize. But he is there, he is being worked on, and he has cute little hoopy earrings. If you reach this point of the video, that makes you legally and eternally part of the 12% club. Well done you. Maybe consider dropping a like on the video or even a cheeky subscribe. It helps keep me motivated through life's little trials, like having to record in an echoey room that can't be fixed even with 50 pieces of acoustic foam stuck to the walls, windows, and briefly the microphone itself. Sorry about the audio, I tried to fix it, it didn't work. Here you go. On an unrelated note, I signed up to Ko-fi, which is like an online tip jar. I don't monetize much of the content on this channel, so if you feel like supporting monetarily, there's a link in the description. Anyway, bye-bye. What the fuck? I have planes flying overhead. Planes. So many planes. What's happening? Can you hear that? It's like... It's 9 AM. What are you doing?